Marcus Chun pressed his face against the cold observation deck window, watching the massive alien fleet approach through the void of space. The ships were unlike anything he had ever seen during his 3 years as a communications officer aboard the Coalition vessel Harmony's Edge. These weren't the sleek, elegant designs of the Altari or the geometric patterns of the Vorthak. These ships looked like they had been carved from black stone, their surfaces covered in what appeared to be organic growths that pulsed with sickly green light. "First time seeing the Devourers up close?" asked Commander Zaratach, her blue-scaled head turning toward him. The Altari commander had been fighting these creatures for over 2 decades, and the scars across her elongated face told the story of countless battles. Marcus nodded, unable to find words. The stories he had heard about the Devourers seemed impossible until now. An ancient race that consumed entire star systems, literally eating planets, and converting their matter into more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. They had appeared at the edge of known space 5 years ago, and every attempt at communication had been met with silence followed by total destruction. "How many worlds have they taken?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 47 confirmed, replied General Korthak, the massive Vorthak warrior whose stone-like skin bore ceremonial scars of leadership. "Countless more in the outer territories where our scouts cannot reach. They move like a plague across the galaxy, leaving nothing but empty space behind them." The bridge of the Harmony's Edge buzzed with activity as crew members from a dozen different species worked together, preparing for what many believed would be their final battle. The Coalition had assembled the largest fleet in galactic history, bringing together warriors and ships from every member species. Over 3,000 vessels hung in formation around them, representing the combined military might of 17 civilizations. Marcus had been assigned to this fleet not because of his combat experience, which was minimal, but because of his unique gift for understanding alien languages and communication patterns. During his time in the academy, he had shown an unusual ability to pick up new languages and decipher complex communication systems. The Coalition hoped that if anyone could find a way to communicate with the Devourers, it would be him. "Signal from the flagship," announced Lieutenant Tvara, her tentacles dancing across the communication controls with practiced efficiency. "Admiral Vexhai is calling for all vessels to assume attack formation. The advanced scouts report the Devourer fleet will reach our position in 6 hours." Marcus watched as the massive Coalition fleet began to move, thousands of ships repositioning themselves into a complex three-dimensional formation that had been perfected through decades of interspecies cooperation. At the center, the mighty Altari dreadnoughts with their crystal-powered weapons that could crack moons. Surrounding them, the Vorthak heavy cruisers built like flying fortresses, their armor thick enough to withstand direct hits from stellar bombs. Fast attack squadrons of Kalari ships darted between the larger vessels like silver fish, their pilots connected directly to their ships through neural links. The humans had only been part of the Coalition for 15 years, since first contact had been made near Earth's outer colonies. Their small fleet of 30 ships looked almost primitive compared to the advanced vessels of the other species. Marcus had always felt a bit embarrassed by humanity's modest contribution to Coalition military power, but today that feeling was stronger than ever. "Where are the human ships positioned?" Marcus asked, scanning the formation display. Commander Zarath's expression grew somber. "Rearguard, along with the medical and supply vessels. Admiral Vexhai believes this battle will require our most experienced warriors at the front." Marcus understood the logic, but it still stung. Humanity was the newest member of the Coalition, and their technology was considered primitive by galactic standards. Human weapons used chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles, while other species wielded energy beams that could cut through asteroids. Human ships relied on nuclear fusion, while the Altari had mastered matter-antimatter reactions that produced 10 times more power. Even human soldiers, while brave and adaptable, lacked the natural advantages of other species. They couldn't fly like the Kalari, didn't have the armored skin of the Vorthak, and their lifespans were short compared to most Coalition members. The hours passed slowly as both fleets approached each other across the emptiness of space. Marcus spent his time monitoring communication frequencies, hoping to detect some signal from the Devourer fleet that might give them an advantage. Instead, he found only an eerie silence punctuated by strange harmonics that seemed to resonate through subspace itself. "I'm picking up something," Marcus announced as his instruments detected an unusual pattern. "It's not standard communication, but there's definitely some kind of organized signal coming from their fleet." Captain Reeves, the human liaison officer assigned to the Harmony's Edge, leaned over Marcus's shoulder to examine the data. "Can you decode it?" Marcus frowned at the readouts. The signals were unlike anything in his experience, following mathematical patterns that seemed to twist back on themselves in impossible ways. "It's almost like they're communicating through reality itself, bending space to carry information. I've never seen anything like it. The Devourers are older than any of our civilizations," General Korthak explained, his deep voice rumbling through the bridge. "They mastered technologies we can barely comprehend when our species were still learning to make fire. That is what makes them so dangerous." As they spoke, the first exchange of fire began at the edge of both fleets' detection ranges. Long-range missiles and energy beams crossed the void between them, most being intercepted by defensive systems, but some finding their targets. On the tactical display, Marcus watched as small icons representing ships began to flicker and disappear. "Coalition Vanguard is engaging the enemy," reported Lieutenant Tvara. "First wave consists of Kalari attack squadrons and Altari destroyers." Through the observation windows, Marcus could see distant flashes of light as weapons discharged and ships exploded. The Kalari pilots were performing incredible maneuvers, their ships dancing between enemy fire while delivering precise strikes against Devourer vessels. The Altari destroyers fired concentrated beams of crystallized energy that could punch through armor like it was paper. For a moment, it seemed like the coalition might have a chance. The Devourer ships were large and powerful, but they appeared to be slower than expected, and their formation seemed less coordinated than coalition intelligence had predicted. Then, everything changed. "New contacts," shouted Tvara, her voice filled with alarm. Massive energy signatures appearing throughout the Devourer fleet. Marcus watched in horror as the Devourer ships began to transform. What he had initially taken for organic growths on their hulls were actually some kind of deployment mechanism. Thousands of smaller vessels emerged from each large ship, like seeds being released from pods. Within minutes, the Devourer fleet had tripled in size. "By the Seven Suns," whispered Commander Zarth. They were hiding their true numbers. The battle quickly turned into a nightmare. The Devourer ships moved with perfect coordination, their weapons firing in synchronized patterns that overwhelmed coalition defenses. Marcus watched helplessly as entire squadrons of Kalari fighters vanished under concentrated fire, and even the mighty Altari dreadnoughts began to take serious damage. "Coalition forces are falling back to secondary positions," announced General Korthak. But his usual confidence was shaken. "We've lost 30% of our forward elements in the first 20 minutes. Marcus continued monitoring the strange signals from the Devourer fleet, and gradually he began to understand their true nature. "They're not just communicating," he said, his voice filled with growing dread. "They're coordinating on a level we never imagined. Every ship in their fleet is connected, sharing information instantly across vast distances. They're fighting as a single organism." The implications were terrifying. The coalition relied on traditional command structures and communication systems that took time to relay orders across large fleets. The Devourers had no such limitations. Every ship knew exactly what every other ship was doing at all times, allowing them to coordinate attacks and defenses with impossible precision. "Can we disrupt their connection somehow?" asked Captain Reeves. Marcus shook his head. "I don't even understand how it works, let alone how to interfere with it. They're using principles of physics that our science hasn't discovered yet." The retreat continued as coalition forces tried to regroup, but the Devourers pressed their advantage relentlessly. Their ships moved through space like a living thing, flowing around coalition defenses and striking at weak points with surgical precision. Marcus watched legendary warriors and commanders who had fought in dozens of campaigns struggle against an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. Admiral Korvik of the Vorthak Heavy Division, famous for holding the line at the Battle of Nexus Prime, saw his entire battle group surrounded and destroyed in a matter of minutes. Commander Sarah, the Kalari ace pilot who had single-handedly destroyed a pirate fleet at the Rim Wars, vanished along with her squadron when they were caught in a perfectly timed crossfire. "We're losing," Marcus said quietly, stating what everyone on the bridge already knew but was afraid to voice. "All ships, withdraw to fallback positions," came Admiral Vexhi's voice over the communication system. The Admiral's usual calm authority was strained, and Marcus could hear the sounds of battle in the background of the transmission. The flagship itself was under attack. As the Coalition fleet began its fighting retreat, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. The Devourer ships weren't just destroying their enemies. They were collecting the wreckage. Massive harvester vessels moved behind the main fleet, scooping up debris and somehow processing it into new materials. He watched as the remains of destroyed Coalition ships were literally consumed and converted into new Devourer vessels. "They're growing stronger as they fight us," he announced, his voice barely controlled. "Every ship they destroy makes them more powerful." The retreat became a rout as this terrible truth became apparent to the Coalition commanders. Fighting the Devourers wasn't just hopeless because of their superior technology and coordination. Every loss on the Coalition side made the enemy stronger while weakening their own forces. It was a battle they could not win through conventional means. "Human vessels are moving to cover the retreat," reported Tvara, surprise evident in her voice. Marcus looked at the tactical display and saw the small human fleet leaving their protected position in the rear guard. The 30 human ships were moving forward, not backward, placing themselves between the pursuing Devourers and the retreating Coalition forces. "What are they doing?" asked Commander Zarth. "Those ships can't stand against the Devourer fleet." Captain Reeves was listening to communications from the human vessels, his face growing pale. "Admiral Chun is ordering all human ships to form a defensive line. They're going to buy time for the rest of the fleet to escape." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Admiral Chun was his older brother, David, who had commanded the human contribution to the Coalition fleet. The idea of David and his crews sacrificing themselves was unbearable, but Marcus could see the tactical logic. Someone had to delay the Devourers long enough for the main fleet to reach safe jump distance, and the human ships were the most expendable force in the Coalition. "Those ships will be destroyed in minutes," General Korthak said grimly. "The humans are brave, but their weapons cannot penetrate Devourer armor." Marcus watched as the human ships took position, their small size making them look even more insignificant against the massive Devourer fleet that was bearing down on them. He thought about the crews aboard those vessels, many of them people he had known since childhood, friends from the academy, fellow officers who had shared his dreams of exploring the galaxy and protecting Earth's colonies. The first exchange of fire began as the human ships opened fire with everything they had. Missiles, railgun rounds, and laser beams struck the leading Devourer vessels, but, as predicted, they caused little visible damage. The Devourer ships didn't even slow down, treating the human fleet as nothing more than a minor annoyance. Then, something unexpected happened. Instead of the quick destruction everyone expected, the human ships began employing tactics that Marcus had never seen before. They weren't trying to fight the Devourers directly. They were fighting in a completely different way. Human ships worked in small groups, using their superior speed and maneuverability to dart in and out of the Devourer formation, not targeting the enemy ships themselves, but the space around them. "What are they doing?" Commander Zarth asked, leaning forward to study the tactical display. Marcus watched in fascination as the human ships deployed some kind of device he didn't recognize. Small objects were being ejected from the human vessels and left floating in space, creating a scattered field of unknown devices throughout the area where the Devourer fleet was advancing. "I'm detecting massive energy buildups from those devices," reported Tvara, her tentacles working frantically at her controls. "They're not weapons. They're some kind of space-time distortion generators." Suddenly, the space around the Devourer fleet began to ripple and warp. The mysterious devices that the human ships had deployed activated simultaneously, creating localized distortions in space-time itself. Devourer ships found themselves suddenly off course, their perfectly coordinated movements disrupted by unexpected changes in the fabric of space around them. "Impossible," whispered General Korthak. The humans have developed spatial manipulation technology? When? How? Marcus felt a surge of pride mixed with amazement. Humanity had been hiding their true capabilities, allowing the other coalition species to believe they were primitive and weak while secretly developing technologies that even the advanced alien civilizations had not mastered. The effect on the Devourer fleet was immediate and devastating. Their perfect coordination was broken as ships found themselves fighting against spatial distortions that made their movements unpredictable. Some vessels were pulled off course by gravity wells that appeared from nowhere, while others found themselves accelerated in random directions by space-time compression fields. For the first time since the battle began, the Devourer advance faltered. Marcus realized that everything he thought he knew about humanity's place in the galaxy was about to change. His species had been preparing for this moment, developing weapons and tactics in secret while allowing their allies to underestimate them. The real battle was about to begin, and humanity was ready to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. The space around the Devourer fleet continued to ripple and twist as more human ships arrived at the battle zone. Marcus watched in amazement as vessels he had never seen before emerged from what appeared to be empty space. These weren't the standard human ships he was familiar with. They were larger, more advanced, and carried weapon systems that defied his understanding of human technology. "Where did those ships come from?" asked Commander Zaratich, her blue scales darkening with confusion and concern. Captain Reeves was receiving encrypted communications from the new arrivals, his expression growing more surprised with each message. "It's the Shadow Fleet," he said quietly. "Ships that officially don't exist, built in secret shipyards beyond the Outer Rim. They've been preparing for this day since humanity first learned about the Devourer threat." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. While he had been working as a communications officer for the Coalition, believing humanity was a minor player in galactic affairs, his own species had been secretly preparing for war on a scale he couldn't have imagined. The 30 ships that had initially represented humanity's contribution to the Coalition fleet were apparently just a tiny fraction of their real military capability. The new human vessels moved with a coordination that rivaled even the Devourers. They deployed in perfect formation, their movements synchronized to the millisecond as they began implementing tactics that seemed to have been planned years in advance. Unlike the Coalition forces, which relied on traditional combat doctrines adapted from centuries of interspecies warfare, the humans were fighting as if they had always known exactly what they would face. "How is this possible?" General Korthak demanded, his massive hands gripping the tactical display's edge with enough force to crack the metal. "Our intelligence networks would have detected such a massive shipbuilding program." "Not if we built them where you weren't looking," replied Captain Reeves with a slight smile. "Humanity learned long ago that sometimes survival depends on keeping secrets, even from your friends." The battle was transforming before their eyes. The Devourer fleet, which had seemed unstoppable just minutes before, was now struggling to maintain formation as human ships executed maneuvers that shouldn't have been possible with conventional technology. Marcus watched as one group of human vessels seemed to fold space around themselves, appearing to teleport from one position to another without crossing the intervening distance. "They're using controlled wormhole technology," breathed Tvara, her tentacles trembling with excitement and fear. "The humans have mastered instantaneous transportation across battlefield distances." The tactical implications were staggering. The Devourer's greatest advantage had been their perfect coordination and their ability to predict enemy movements. But how could you coordinate against an enemy that could appear anywhere on the battlefield without warning? Human ships were striking from multiple directions simultaneously, hitting Devourer vessels, and then vanishing before return fire could reach them. Marcus began to understand that this wasn't just advanced technology, it was an entirely different approach to warfare. The other Coalition species fought with honor, following established rules of engagement and tactical doctrines that emphasized straightforward confrontation. Humanity was fighting like they had something to prove, using every advantage they could create or discover, no matter how unconventional. "Devourer fleet is fragmenting," reported Tvara, her voice filled with disbelief. "Their coordination network is being disrupted by localized space-time distortions. Individual ship groups are losing contact with the main fleet." The key to the Devourer's success, their perfect communication system that allowed them to fight as one organism, was being systematically destroyed by human interference. Marcus watched as human ships deployed waves of what appeared to be space-time bombs, devices that created temporary tears in reality itself. These weren't weapons designed to destroy ships directly, but to disrupt the exotic physics that allowed the Devourers to maintain their hive-mind coordination. By the infinite, whispered Commander Zarth. The humans have been studying the Devourers' communication methods and developing countermeasures. Marcus realized that his work as a communications expert might have contributed to this moment. All the data he had gathered about alien communication systems, all his reports on the strange signals he had detected from various species, it had all been forwarded to human intelligence services. They had been preparing for this battle not just with new weapons and ships, but with a deep understanding of their enemy's greatest strength. The tide of battle was turning, but the cost was becoming apparent. Even with their advanced technology, human ships were taking losses. Marcus watched as 3 of the new vessels were caught in a coordinated Devourer attack, their exotic armor unable to completely protect them from weapons that could crack planets. The crews of those ships, people he might have known, fellow humans who had volunteered for what they knew might be a one-way mission, were gone in seconds. Human casualties are mounting, Captain Reeves reported grimly. They're taking risks that no sane military commander would approve. That's because they're not fighting to win a battle, General Korthak said, his voice filled with something that might have been respect. They're fighting to save everyone else. Marcus understood what the Vorthak general meant. The human fleet wasn't just trying to defeat the Devourers. They were buying time for the coalition to escape, gathering intelligence about Devourer capabilities, and, most importantly, proving that these ancient destroyers could be fought effectively. Every human ship that fell was providing data that would be crucial for future encounters. But the humans weren't just sacrificing themselves. As the battle continued, Marcus began to see evidence of strategies that went far beyond anything he could have imagined. Human ships were deploying technologies that seemed to violate fundamental laws of physics. Some vessels were creating gravity fields strong enough to crush smaller Devourer ships, while others were generating energy beams that seemed to ignore armor entirely, striking directly at the internal systems of enemy vessels. "How advanced is human technology really?" asked Commander Zarth, turning to Captain Reeves with an expression of mixed admiration and concern. Captain Reeves was quiet for a long moment before answering. "More advanced than we've let anyone know. Humanity learned early that survival in a galaxy full of older, more powerful species meant keeping our true capabilities hidden. What you're seeing now is the result of 200 years of secret research and development." 200 years. Marcus felt his understanding of human history reshaping itself in his mind. Humanity hadn't just recently developed space travel and joined the galactic community. They had been preparing for threats like the Devourers since their first tentative steps beyond Earth's solar system. Every human colony, every research station, every seemingly innocent scientific expedition had been part of a larger plan to ensure the species' survival. The battle reached a new phase as the largest Devourer vessels began to respond to the human assault. These massive ships, each the size of a small moon, had remained in the background until now, apparently serving as command and control nodes for the fleet. As their smaller vessels struggled against human attacks, these giant ships began to move forward, their weapons charging with energy readings that made every sensor on the coalition fleet scream warnings. "Those ships could destroy entire planets," Tvara announced, her voice tight with fear. "Energy readings are off our measurement scales." The human response was immediate and decisive. The largest vessels in the Shadow Fleet, ships that Marcus hadn't even noticed before, moved to intercept the Devourer giants. These human vessels were truly massive, nearly matching the size of their enemies, and they moved with a purpose that suggested this confrontation had been planned from the beginning. "What are those ships?" asked General Korthak, staring at the tactical display where icons representing the massive human vessels were moving into position. "World killers," Captain Reeves said quietly. "Ships designed for exactly this situation. Humanity learned long ago that sometimes you have to be prepared to fight monsters with monsters." The clash between the giant vessels created energy discharges that were visible across entire star systems. Marcus watched as the human ships engaged weapons that seemed to tear holes in space itself, while the Devourer giants responded with beams of destructive force that could have melted continents. The battle between these titans made the earlier skirmishes look like training exercises. But even as he watched this incredible display of military might, Marcus began to notice something else. Throughout the battle zone, smaller human ships were engaged in activities that had nothing to do with direct combat. They were collecting samples, scanning wreckage, and conducting what appeared to be scientific experiments even in the middle of a life-and-death struggle. They're studying the enemy, he realized aloud. The humans aren't just fighting, they're learning everything they can about Devourer technology. This realization made Marcus understand the true scope of humanity's plan. This battle wasn't just about stopping this particular Devourer fleet. The humans were treating it as a massive intelligence-gathering operation, collecting data that would be crucial for future encounters with this ancient enemy. Every sacrifice was serving multiple purposes. Every tactical decision was designed to maximize the amount of information they could gather about their foes. The battle between the giant ships continued to rage, but Marcus began to see that the humans had achieved their primary objectives. The Devourer fleet was no longer a coordinated force. It had been broken into dozens of smaller groups that were fighting independently. Their perfect coordination was gone, their communication network disrupted, and their confidence shaken by an enemy they had clearly underestimated. Coalition fleet is reaching safe jump distance, reported Tvara. Admiral Vexhai is signaling for immediate withdrawal to the fallback positions. What about the human ships? Asked Commander Zuritich, her concern evident despite her usual military composure. Captain Reeves checked his communications panel. They're staying. Admiral Chun says the battle isn't over yet. Marcus felt his heart clench as he thought about his brother David and the thousands of human crew members who were choosing to remain in the battle zone. They had already accomplished more than anyone had thought possible, proving that the Devourers could be fought and defeated. But instead of withdrawing to safety, they were staying to finish what they had started. As the Harmony's Edge prepared to jump away with the rest of the Coalition fleet, Marcus took one last look at the battle zone. Human ships continued their deadly dance with the remaining Devourer vessels, using tactics and technologies that defied everything he thought he knew about warfare. In the distance, the massive Titan-class ships continued their apocalyptic duel, trading blows that could reshape solar systems. The jump to hyperspace should have taken them instantly away from the battle, but Marcus felt as though he was leaving part of himself behind. His understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy had been completely overturned in a single day. His species wasn't the naive newcomer he had always believed them to be. They were a major galactic power that had been hiding its true strength for generations. As the stars blurred into the familiar lines of hyperspace travel, Marcus wondered what other secrets humanity had been keeping. If they had developed this level of technology in secret, what else were they capable of? And, most importantly, what did this mean for the future of the Coalition and the ongoing war against the Devourers? The battle behind them was still raging, and Marcus knew that by the time they received word of its outcome, the galaxy might be a very different place. Humanity had revealed itself as a force to be reckoned with, but the Devourers were an ancient enemy with resources and knowledge that spanned eons. The war was far from over, and the true test of human capabilities was yet to come. But, for the first time since the Devourer threat had become known, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. If humanity could surprise everyone this completely, if they had been preparing for this war while everyone else was still trying to understand the threat, then, maybe, just maybe, the galaxy had a chance of survival after all. The question that remained was whether humanity's revelations would be enough to unite the Coalition species in a truly effective resistance, or whether the secrets they had kept would create new divisions and mistrust. Marcus knew that the next phase of the war would be fought not just in space, but in the political chambers and alliance meetings where the fate of civilizations was decided. Humanity had shown they could fight. Now they would have to prove they could be trusted with the power they had revealed. 3 days after the battle, Marcus found himself in the Coalition's Emergency Command Center on Nexus Station, the massive space station that served as the political and military heart of the Galactic Alliance. The station buzzed with activity as delegates from 17 species tried to make sense of what humanity had revealed about itself during the confrontation with the Devourer fleet. The news from the battlefield had been shocking. Not only had the human fleet succeeded in driving off the Devourers, something no coalition force had ever accomplished, but they had done so with minimal losses while inflicting devastating damage on an enemy that had previously seemed unstoppable. The reports were almost too incredible to believe, except that they came from hundreds of witnesses aboard coalition vessels. Marcus stood in the observation gallery overlooking the main assembly hall, where representatives from across the galaxy were engaged in heated debate. The atmosphere was tense, with some species expressing gratitude for humanity's intervention, while others voiced suspicion and concern about the implications of humanity's hidden capabilities. "The humans have been lying to us for 15 years, declared Ambassador Kelthara of the Altari, her crystalline voice carrying clearly across the chamber. They joined our alliance under false pretenses, claiming to be a primitive species in need of protection and guidance. Now we learn they possess technology that surpasses our own in many areas." General Vorthak Prime, speaking for the Vorthak Military Council, rose to his impressive height. "The question is not whether they deceived us, but whether their deception was justified. The results speak for themselves. Humanity succeeded where our combined forces failed." Marcus watched as Captain Reeves, now revealed as Admiral Reeves following the activation of humanity's true military structure, stood to address the assembly. The man Marcus had known as a simple liaison officer was apparently one of the highest-ranking officials in Human Space Command, and his presence here represented humanity's first open acknowledgement of their real status in galactic affairs. "Honored delegates," Admiral Reeves began, his voice calm despite the hostile atmosphere. "Humanity's caution was born from hard experience. Our history is filled with examples of what happens when a weaker species reveals its capabilities too soon to stronger neighbors. We chose to prepare in secret rather than risk becoming a target before we were ready to defend ourselves." "But at what cost?" demanded Chancellor Mordun of the Kalari Federation. "How many lives could have been saved if you had shared your technology earlier? How many worlds might still exist if we had known what you were capable of?" The accusation hung heavy in the air. Marcus knew that the Chancellor was referring to the 47 worlds the Devourers had already consumed, and the billions of lives lost while humanity's advanced technology remained hidden. It was a question that Marcus himself had been struggling with since learning the truth about his species' capabilities. Admiral Reeves was quiet for a long moment before responding. "That is a burden we will carry forever. But consider this. If we had revealed our technology 5 years ago when the Devourers first appeared, would your governments have worked with us as equals, or would they have seen us as a threat to be controlled or eliminated? Our analysis suggested that premature disclosure would have led to civil war within the coalition, leaving us even less prepared for the Devourer threat." Marcus realized there was wisdom in humanity's caution. The galactic community was built on a careful balance of power between species with vastly different capabilities and motivations. The sudden revelation that the newest and supposedly weakest member actually possessed superior technology could have destabilized everything. "The past cannot be changed," interrupted Admiral Vex High, the Altari fleet commander whose forces had been saved by human intervention. "The question now is how we move forward. The Devourers have been dealt a serious blow, but they are far from defeated. We need humanity's capabilities if we hope to survive the coming war." The debate continued for hours, with some delegates demanding full disclosure of all human technology, while others argued for maintaining the status quo, with humanity taking a more open leadership role. Marcus found himself thinking about his brother David, who was still somewhere in the battle zone with the human fleet, continuing operations that the coalition knew nothing about. During a break in the formal session, Marcus was approached by Dr. Elena Vasquez, a human scientist he had never met before but who somehow knew his name and service record. She was an older woman with graying hair and the kind of intense focus that marked a lifetime dedicated to research. "You're Marcus Chun," she said, extending her hand. I've read your reports on Xena communication. Your work on deciphering the Devourer's signal patterns was instrumental in developing our countermeasures. Marcus shook her hand, surprised. I thought those reports just went to standard Coalition intelligence files. They did. But the Coalition shares certain intelligence with all member species, including humanity. Your insights into how the Devourers coordinate their fleets helped us understand their greatest weakness. Dr. Vasquez smiled. In fact, several of your observations were key to developing the space-time disruption technology you saw in action. The revelation that his routine work had contributed to humanity's secret preparations made Marcus feel both proud and uncomfortable. He had unknowingly been part of his species' hidden agenda while believing he was simply doing his job for the Coalition. What else have we been working on? Marcus asked. What other secrets is humanity keeping? Dr. Vasquez glanced around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. Walk with me. There are things you need to understand about what's really happening in this war. They made their way through the station's corridors to a secure area that Marcus hadn't known existed. Dr. Vasquez used authorization codes that gave them access to levels of the station reserved for the highest levels of Coalition command. But she seemed to know her way around as if she had been there many times before. Humanity has been more involved in Coalition operations than most people realize, she explained as they walked. We've had scientists and analysts embedded in research projects across the galaxy, contributing to technological development while gathering intelligence about potential threats. They entered a laboratory space that appeared to be entirely human-operated, despite being located in the heart of the Coalition's most secure facility. Marcus saw technology he didn't recognize, including displays showing real-time data from what appeared to be active combat operations. Is that from the battle zone? Marcus asked, pointing at a screen showing tactical movements in real space. Your brother's fleet is still engaged with Devourer forces, Dr. Vasquez confirmed. But they're not just fighting. They're implementing the second phase of humanity's response to the Devourer threat. Marcus watched as human ships moved through space in formations he didn't understand, deploying devices and conducting operations that went far beyond simple combat. What kind of second phase? The Devourers aren't just conquerors, Dr. Vasquez explained. They're an infection, a plague that spreads across the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. Fighting them ship to ship will never be enough because they can always build more ships from consumed worlds. We need to attack the source. The screens around them displayed information that made Marcus's mind reel. Human ships were conducting deep space reconnaissance missions, mapping Devourer supply lines, and communication networks that stretched across hundreds of light years. They had identified what appeared to be central command nodes, massive constructions that coordinated Devourer operations across entire galactic regions. We're going to strike at their heart, Dr. Vasquez said simply. But first, we need to understand how they operate on a fundamental level. Marcus studied the data, his experience with alien communication systems helping him understand some of what he was seeing. The Devourers operated through a network that connected individual ships to larger command structures, which in turn were linked to massive coordination centers that might span multiple star systems. It was like a nervous system for an organism the size of a galaxy. How long have you known about this? He asked. We've suspected since the first Devourer attacks 5 years ago. But proving it required getting close enough to their fleet to conduct detailed scans, and surviving long enough to analyze the data. The battle 3 days ago gave us that opportunity. Marcus began to understand the true scope of what had happened during the battle. While everyone else saw humanity's technological revelation as a response to the immediate threat, it was actually part of a much larger strategy that had been years in development. The battle hadn't just been about stopping one Devourer fleet. It had been about gathering the intelligence needed to strike back at the enemy's core infrastructure. What happens next? Marcus asked. That depends partly on what happens in the assembly, Dr. Vasquez replied. Humanity can continue operating in secret, but the scale of what we need to accomplish requires resources and cooperation that only the full coalition can provide. We need to convince them to trust us despite our deception. Marcus looked at the tactical displays showing the ongoing operations in the battle zone. Human ships were pushing deeper into Devourer territory, following signal traces back toward their sources while fighting running battles with enemy forces. It was incredibly dangerous work that was providing crucial intelligence about an enemy that had seemed incomprehensible just days before. "There's something else you should know," Dr. Vasquez said quietly. "The technology we revealed in the battle, the space-time manipulation, the advanced weapons, the coordination systems, that's not the extent of human capabilities. We've been holding back even more advanced systems because the risks of using them are enormous." "What kind of risks?" "The kind that could destabilize star systems or tear holes in space-time itself. Humanity has been developing weapons of last resort, technologies so powerful they could potentially damage the fabric of reality. We hope never to use them. But if the Devourers cannot be stopped by conventional means..." Marcus felt a chill as he contemplated the implications. Humanity wasn't just more advanced than they had pretended. They had been preparing for the possibility of apocalyptic warfare on a scale that could threaten the galaxy itself. The sound of an alert interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Vasquez moved quickly to the communication console, where incoming data was displaying urgent updates from the battle zone. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "Your brother's fleet has made contact with something new," she replied, her face grave. "Something the Devourers have been guarding more carefully than anything else we've encountered." The tactical display showed human ships approaching what appeared to be a massive structure deep within Devourer territory. It was larger than anything they had seen before, and the energy readings coming from it suggested technology that operated on principles beyond even humanity's advanced understanding. "Is it some kind of command center?" Marcus asked. "We don't know," Dr. Vasquez admitted. "But whatever it is, the Devourers are willing to sacrifice enormous numbers of ships to protect it. Admiral Chen's fleet is requesting immediate reinforcement and full authorization to use humanity's most advanced weapons systems." Marcus realized that his brother was on the verge of discovering something that could change the nature of the war entirely. The human fleet had penetrated deeper into Devourer territory than anyone had thought possible, and they had found something that might be the key to understanding or destroying the ancient enemy that threatened all galactic civilization. "Are you going to authorize it?" Marcus asked. Dr. Vasquez was already activating communication systems. "That decision is above my level. But I suspect that within the next few hours, the Coalition is going to learn just how powerful humanity really is and how far we're willing to go to protect the galaxy." Marcus watched as emergency protocols activated throughout the facility. Whatever his brother had found, it was significant enough to trigger responses from the highest levels of human command. The war was entering a new phase, and humanity was about to reveal capabilities that would either save the galaxy or reshape it beyond recognition. The assembly session would have to wait. The real battle for the future of galactic civilization was happening right now, thousands of light years away, where human ships were pushing into the unknown heart of an enemy older than recorded history. The emergency session of the Coalition Assembly was unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives from 17 species sat in stunned silence as real-time data streamed in from Admiral Chen's fleet, showing humanity's most advanced ships engaging with something that defied all understanding of what was possible. Marcus stood beside Dr. Vasquez in the command center that had been hastily established within the assembly complex. Around them, the galaxy's most brilliant minds struggled to comprehend what the human Deep Strike fleet had discovered at the heart of Devourer territory. "The structure is over 10,000 kilometers in diameter," reported Commander Torres, humanity's chief science officer, her voice carrying across the communication link from the battle zone. "It appears to be constructed from materials that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Our sensors are detecting energy patterns that suggest it's not just a command center. It's some kind of reality manipulation device." On the main display, Marcus watched as human ships maneuvered around an object that hurt to look at directly. The Devourer structure seemed to shift and change as he watched it, as if it existed in several different states of reality at once. Smaller Devourer vessels swarmed around it like antibodies protecting a vital organ, but even they seemed affected by the strange energies radiating from the massive construction. "It's a world forge," Dr. Vasquez said quietly, her voice filled with a mixture of wonder and horror. "The Devourers aren't just consuming planets. They're using the consumed matter to create these reality-altering constructions. Admiral Vex High, the Altari commander who had witnessed humanity's capabilities firsthand, leaned forward in his chair. What do you mean by reality manipulation? Dr. Vasquez activated a holographic display that showed theoretical models humanity had developed based on the incoming data. The structure appears to be designed to alter the fundamental properties of space-time within a localized area. It could theoretically change physical laws, create new types of matter, or even open gateways to other dimensions. The implications were staggering. If the Devourers possessed technology that could literally rewrite the rules of physics, then conventional warfare, even humanity's advanced technology, might be insufficient to stop them. How many of these structures exist? Asked General Korthak, his massive form tense with concern. Unknown, Dr. Vasquez replied. But our analysis suggests that the Devourer expansion pattern has been designed to establish these world forges at strategic points throughout the galaxy. They're not just conquering. They're transforming reality itself to suit their purposes. Marcus felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. The war wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the fundamental nature of reality in their region of space. If the Devourers succeeded in establishing enough of these reality-altering structures, they could potentially remake the galaxy according to their own design. Admiral Chun is requesting permission to deploy humanity's most advanced weapon systems, reported the communication officer. He believes this structure represents an existential threat that justifies any level of response. The assembly chamber erupted in urgent discussions as representatives realized the magnitude of what they were facing. Some species called for immediate withdrawal, arguing that they were confronting forces beyond their ability to comprehend or combat. Others demanded that humanity reveal exactly what weapons they were prepared to use. Admiral Reeves stood to address the assembly, his expression grave. The weapon systems Admiral Chun is requesting permission to deploy are based on principles that we ourselves do not fully understand. They were developed as absolute last resort measures, to be used only when the survival of galactic civilization itself was at stake. What kind of weapons? Demanded Ambassador Kelthra. Reality anchors, Admiral Reeves replied. Devices designed to stabilize space-time itself and prevent fundamental alterations to physical law. Using them requires tremendous energy and carries risks that could affect entire star systems. Marcus watched as the representatives absorbed this information. Humanity had been preparing not just for conventional warfare, but for a conflict that might require weapons capable of stabilizing reality itself. The level of foresight and technological development this represented was beyond anything the other species had imagined. There's more, Dr. Vasquez added quietly. Our analysis suggests that the reality manipulation technology the Devourers are using may be based on principles similar to our own most advanced research. It's possible that they're using a corrupted or weaponized version of technology that could potentially benefit all galactic civilization if properly understood. This revelation changed the strategic calculus entirely. The Devourer World Forge wasn't just a threat, it was potentially a source of technological advancement that could revolutionize galactic civilization. But accessing that technology would require getting close enough to study it, which meant confronting the massive Devourer forces defending the structure. Admiral Chun is reporting heavy resistance. Came an urgent transmission from the battle zone. Devourer forces are employing defensive measures we've never seen before. They're creating localized alterations in space-time to protect the World Forge. On the tactical display, Marcus watched as human ships found themselves fighting not just enemy vessels, but reality itself. Space around the World Forge was becoming unstable, with areas where time moved at different rates and regions where the normal laws of physics simply didn't apply. Human ships that entered these zones found their weapons ineffective, their movement unpredictable, and their sensor readings meaningless. This is beyond anything we prepared for. Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication link, strain evident despite his professional calm. We need those reality anchors, and we need them now. The moment of decision had arrived. Admiral Reeves looked around the assembly chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from species that had been humanity's allies and friends for 15 years. We're asking for your trust, he said simply. We're going to deploy weapons that could potentially destabilize this entire region of space if something goes wrong. We believe the risk is justified by the threat we face, but we won't act without coalition approval. The debate that followed was intense, but brief. The data from the battle zone made it clear that conventional resistance was failing, and the World Forge continued to grow stronger as it consumed energy from the ongoing battle. Whatever the Devourers were building there, allowing it to reach completion would be catastrophic for galactic civilization. The vote is unanimous, announced Assembly President Morgeth. Humanity is authorized to deploy whatever weapons are necessary to neutralize the Devourer threat. Admiral Reeves activated his command authorization codes. Admiral Chun, you are cleared for Protocol 7. Reality anchors are authorized for immediate deployment. Marcus watched as new icons appeared on the tactical display. Human ships he hadn't seen before, vessels that had apparently been waiting in deep space for exactly this authorization. These ships were different from anything in the human fleet, their energy signatures indicating technologies that operated on principles he couldn't begin to understand. Reality anchor deployment commencing, reported Admiral Chun. All ships are moving to minimum safe distance. Anchoring sequence will begin in 60 seconds. The next minute felt like an eternity as human ships withdrew from the immediate area around the World Forge while the specialized reality anchor vessels moved into position. Marcus could see that the Devourers were responding with desperate aggression, throwing everything they had at the human fleet in an attempt to prevent whatever was about to happen. Anchoring sequence initiated, came Admiral Chen's voice, now distorted by the exotic energies being deployed. Reality stabilization, field expanding. On the main display, Marcus watched as space around the Devourer World Forge began to shimmer and solidify. The reality anchors were creating a field that locked space-time into its normal configuration, preventing the exotic manipulations that had made the structure so dangerous. As the field expanded, the World Forge's defenses began to falter as the localized reality distortions that had protected it were neutralized. Direct assault commencing, Admiral Chen reported. All weapons free. The assault on the World Forge was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human ships deployed weapons that seemed to cut through reality itself, creating precise tiers in space-time that bypassed conventional defenses entirely. Other vessels fired beams of pure force that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, striking at the structure's foundations in ways that conventional armor couldn't protect against. But the most devastating attack came from the reality anchors themselves. Rather than simply stabilizing space-time, they began to actively rewrite the fundamental properties of the region around the World Forge, creating zones where the exotic matter composing the structure simply couldn't exist. Marcus watched in amazement as portions of the massive construction began to dissolve as the reality around them was transformed. The structure is destabilizing, Dr. Vasquez announced, monitoring the incoming data. But it's fighting back. The Devourers are trying to override the reality anchors with their own space-time manipulation systems. The battle had become a conflict between competing versions of reality itself. Human technology worked to impose stable, normal physics, while Devourer systems tried to maintain their own exotic alterations. The space around the World Forge became a chaotic maelstrom where the fundamental laws of the universe shifted from moment to moment. Admiral Chen's fleet is taking casualties, reported the communication officer. Several ships have been caught in reality flux zones. Their fate is unknown. Marcus thought about his brother and the thousands of human crew members who were fighting in conditions that defied all understanding of what was possible. They were literally battling for the right to determine what reality would be in this region of space, and the outcome would determine whether galactic civilization could survive. The World Forge is beginning to collapse, Dr. Vasquez announced suddenly. The reality anchors are winning. The structure's exotic matter is being converted back to normal space-time configurations. On the display, Marcus watched as the massive Devourer construction began to tear itself apart. Without the reality distortions that had held it together, the exotic materials composing its structure were reverting to normal matter configurations that couldn't support its impossible architecture. Pieces of the World Forge that had existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously collapsed into normal space-time, creating massive explosions as incompatible forms of matter and energy tried to occupy the same space. All human vessels, withdraw to safe distance, Admiral Chun ordered. The World Forge is undergoing catastrophic dimensional collapse. The destruction of the World Forge created a shockwave that propagated through both normal space and multiple dimensions simultaneously. Marcus watched as reality itself rippled outward from the point of collapse, carrying information about what had happened to Devourer forces throughout the galaxy. We're detecting massive energy discharges from Devourer positions across known space, reported Dr. Vasquez. It appears that the destruction of this World Forge has affected their entire network. The implications were staggering. By destroying one World Forge, humanity had apparently dealt a crippling blow to the entire Devourer civilization. The reality manipulation network that had made them so powerful was interconnected, and damaging one node had cascading effects throughout their entire empire. Admiral Chun is reporting that remaining Devourer forces in the area are withdrawing. Came the update from the battle zone. They appear to be abandoning their positions throughout this entire sector of space. The assembly chamber erupted in cheers and celebration, but Marcus found himself thinking about the broader implications of what they had witnessed. Humanity had revealed not just advanced technology, but the willingness and ability to wage war against reality itself. The other species of the coalition would never look at humanity the same way again. "What happens now?" asked Ambassador Kelthara, her crystalline voice cutting through the celebration. Admiral Reeves looked around the chamber with an expression that mixed relief with concern. "Now we face the consequences of what we've learned. The Devourers may be retreating, but they're not defeated. And the weapons we've deployed have changed the strategic balance of the galaxy in ways that will take years to fully understand." Marcus realized that while humanity had saved galactic civilization from the Devourer threat, they had also revealed themselves as a power that transcended conventional understanding. The question now was whether the other species would accept humanity as an equal partner or begin to see them as a potential threat to be controlled or eliminated. The war against the Devourers might be ending, but a new chapter in galactic politics was about to begin. 6 months after the destruction of the Devourer World Forge, Marcus found himself aboard the newly constructed Unity, a vessel unlike anything that had ever existed in galactic history. The ship represented the first true collaboration between humanity and the other coalition species, incorporating advanced human technology with the best innovations from 17 different civilizations. As the ship's chief communications officer, a position he had earned through his crucial work in understanding Devourer communication systems, Marcus had a unique perspective on how much the galaxy had changed since that day when humanity revealed its true capabilities. The Bridge of the Unity was a testament to the new era of cooperation. Human reality anchoring technology ensured stable space-time conditions throughout the ship, while Altari crystal matrix computers provided processing power that could handle calculations across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Vorthack armor plating had been enhanced with human exotic matter reinforcements, creating protection that could withstand attacks from conventional and reality-based weapons alike. Incoming transmission from the Outer Rim territories, announced Lieutenant Commander Zarak, a young Altari officer who had volunteered to serve on the first integrated crew in galactic history. It's Admiral Chin's expedition fleet. Marcus felt his usual mixture of pride and worry at the mention of his brother's name. David Chun had been leading exploration missions into former Devourer territory, mapping the abandoned regions and studying the remnants of World Forge technology. It was dangerous work that had already led to several disturbing discoveries about what the Devourers had been planning for galactic civilization. "Put it through to the main display," ordered Captain Sarah Mitchell, the human commander who had been chosen to lead the Unity's maiden voyage. The selection of a human captain had been controversial, but the other species had acknowledged that humanity's understanding of the advanced technologies aboard the ship made them the logical choice. Admiral Chin's image appeared on the screen, his face showing the strain of months spent in the dangerous regions beyond known space. Behind him, Marcus could see the bridge of the exploration vessel Pioneer, which had been equipped with humanity's most advanced scanning and analysis equipment. "We've found something," Admiral Chin said without preamble. something that changes everything we thought we knew about the Devourers. The data that began streaming to the Unity showed the remains of a massive Devourer complex. But this one was different from anything they had encountered before. Instead of the organic, grown appearance of most Devourer constructions, this structure showed clear signs of having been built using conventional engineering principles. "What are we looking at?" asked Dr. Vasquez, who had joined the Unity's crew as chief science officer for their mission to establish diplomatic contact with species beyond Coalition space. "The oldest Devourer installation we've ever found," Admiral Chen replied. "And, according to our analysis, it predates their known expansion by at least 50,000 years. But that's not the most important discovery." The display shifted to show detailed scans of the structure's interior. Marcus stared in amazement at what appeared to be a vast library or data storage facility, with information storage systems that incorporated both conventional technology and reality manipulation principles. "We've managed to access some of their historical records," Admiral Chun continued. "What we've learned is going to shock the entire galaxy." As the data download completed, Marcus watched the assembled crew of the Unity react with growing amazement and horror to what Admiral Chen's team had discovered. The historical records painted a picture of the Devourers that was completely different from what anyone had imagined. "The Devourers aren't an ancient evil," Admiral Chen explained. "They're refugees." The records showed that the Devourers had once been a peaceful civilization much like the current Coalition, comprising multiple species working together to explore and understand the galaxy. But they had encountered something that forced them to abandon their original nature and become the reality-consuming force that threatened all galactic life. "What did they encounter?" asked Captain Mitchell. "Something they called the Void Touched," Admiral Chun replied. "Entities from outside normal space-time that consume not just matter and energy, but the fundamental structure of reality itself." The Devourer's reality manipulation technology wasn't originally a weapon. It was a defensive measure designed to protect normal space-time from complete annihilation. Marcus felt a chill as he understood the implications. The Devourers had been fighting a war against something even more terrible than themselves, and their consumption of worlds and reality manipulation had been desperate attempts to build defenses against an enemy that existed outside normal reality. "Are you saying the Devourers were trying to protect the galaxy?" asked Dr. Vasquez. "According to these records, yes," Admiral Chen confirmed. But their methods became increasingly extreme as the war continued. They began consuming entire civilizations to fuel their reality-anchoring technology, eventually becoming the very thing they had originally sought to protect the galaxy from. The bridge of the Unity fell silent as everyone absorbed this revelation. The enemy they had just finished defeating had once been heroes, transformed by an endless war into something monstrous. And if the records were accurate, the real threat they had been fighting against was still out there, somewhere beyond the edges of known space. "There's more," Admiral Chen continued. "The records indicate that the Void Touched were not completely defeated. The Devourers managed to contain them, but the containment is failing. Their reality manipulation network wasn't just for conquest. It was a galaxy-spanning defense grid designed to keep the Void Touched trapped outside normal space-time." Marcus realized with growing horror what this meant. By destroying the World Forge and disrupting the Devourer network, humanity had unknowingly damaged the very defenses that were protecting the galaxy from something far worse than the Devourers themselves. "How long before the containment fails completely?" asked Captain Mitchell. "Unknown," Admiral Chen replied. "The mathematics involved are beyond our current understanding. But some of the reality distortions we've detected suggest that the Void Touched are already beginning to seep through into normal space." Dr. Vasquez was analyzing the data with the ship's advanced computers, her face growing pale as she processed the implications. "If this information is accurate, we may have only years before the containment fails entirely. When that happens, everything we know, matter, energy, space, time itself, could be at risk." The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders as he realized what this meant for humanity and the Coalition. They had revealed their advanced technology and established themselves as a major galactic power just in time to face a threat that made the Devourers look trivial by comparison. "What do the records suggest as a solution?" asked Captain Mitchell. The Devourers believed that the only way to permanently defeat the void touched was to unite all galactic civilization in a coordinated defense, Admiral Chin explained. They tried to accomplish this through conquest and assimilation, but that approach ultimately failed because it destroyed the very civilizations they needed to save. "So we need to succeed where they failed," Marcus said quietly. "We need to unite the galaxy voluntarily, through cooperation rather than conquest." The task seemed impossible. The coalition represented only a tiny fraction of galactic civilization. Beyond their borders lay thousands of independent species, many of whom were hostile to outside contact. Convincing them all to work together against a threat they had never heard of would require diplomatic skills and resources far beyond anything the coalition had ever attempted. "There is one advantage we have that the Devourers lacked," Dr. Vasquez noted, studying the historical records. "Humanity's reality-anchoring technology operates on principles that are fundamentally different from what the Devourers developed. Our approach may be more compatible with maintaining the diversity of thought and culture that seems to be necessary for an effective defense against the void touched." Over the following hours, Marcus watched as the crew of the Unity worked to develop a strategy for addressing this new threat. The ship itself represented a model for what galactic cooperation could accomplish. Different species working together to create something greater than any of them could achieve alone. "We'll need to establish contact with every major civilization in the galaxy," Captain Mitchell decided. "Not just to warn them about the void touched, but to invite them to join in developing a unified defense. That's going to require diplomatic missions to species that have been hostile to outside contact for millennia," warned Commander Zarek. "Some of them may see our approach as just another form of conquest." Marcus found himself thinking about the lessons learned from humanity's own approach to the Devourer threat. His species had succeeded by preparing in secret while appearing weak and non-threatening. Perhaps a similar strategy could work on a galactic scale. "What if we approach this differently?" he suggested. "Instead of asking species to join a unified command structure, what if we offer to share our technology freely while asking only for cooperation in research and information sharing?" The idea was radical. Throughout galactic history, advanced technology had been closely guarded by the species that developed it, used as leverage in political negotiations and trade agreements. But humanity's reality-anchoring technology was unlike conventional advances. It was specifically designed to protect the fundamental structure of reality itself. "It would mean giving up our greatest strategic advantage," Captain Mitchell noted. "But it would also demonstrate that we're different from the Devourers," Marcus replied. "We're offering cooperation rather than demanding submission." The debate continued as the Unity began its journey toward the first of many diplomatic contacts they would need to make. Marcus knew that the success or failure of their mission would determine not just the fate of galactic civilization, but the very nature of reality itself in their region of space. As he watched the stars stream by through the observation ports, Marcus reflected on how much his understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy had changed. His species had gone from being the newest and weakest member of a small alliance to being the potential leaders of a galaxy-wide coalition against a threat that existed outside normal space and time. The war against the Devourers had been just the beginning. The real test of humanity's capabilities and their worthiness to lead galactic civilization was about to begin. Success would require not just advanced technology and military might, but the kind of diplomatic skills and moral leadership that could convince thousands of different species to work together for their mutual survival. Marcus looked at the integrated crew around him, representatives of different species working together with a level of cooperation that would have seemed impossible just months before. If they could make this work on the scale of a single ship, perhaps they could make it work on the scale of an entire galaxy. The future was uncertain, and the challenges ahead were enormous. But for the first time since learning about the Devourer threat, Marcus felt genuinely hopeful about the galaxy's chances for survival. Humanity had proven they could fight when necessary, but, perhaps more importantly, they had proven they could inspire others to fight alongside them. The real battle for the galaxy's future was just beginning, and, this time, humanity wouldn't be fighting alone.